Cedric Morgan had always been an ambitious man, with a mind that sought the stars. A scientist and researcher, he had devoted his life to unraveling the mysteries of the universe. For years, he had studied the cosmos from the confines of his lab on Earth, dreaming of the day he could step foot on alien worlds. When the opportunity arose for a covert mission to an extraterrestrial colony, he jumped at the chance that it was a chance to blend adventure with science, a perfect combination for someone like him. His mission was shrouded in secrecy. Under the guise of a routine supply run, Cedric slipped away from Earth, his heart racing with excitement and trepidation. Upon arriving at the colony, he quickly found a secluded spot, a hidden cave deep within the lunar landscape where he could conduct his research without detection. The colony bustled with life, but the cave was his sanctuary, a place where he could work undisturbed. The first nights were exhilarating as Cedric meticulously collected data on the colony's environment and its inhabitants. He observed the unique flora and fauna that thrive in the alien atmosphere, taking detailed notes and samples. He had 1 week to gather his findings before he had to return to Earth and present his results to his employer. However, unbeknownst to Cedric, the security teams had begun to notice unusual activity near the cave. Their curiosity piqued, they decided to investigate. What they found would change everything. The patrols had long since neglected the cave, but when they ventured inside, they were met with an unexpected sight. Cedric, sound asleep, surrounded by the scientific instruments he had been using. Alarmed, the officers quickly restrained him, their hands tightening around his arms, and escorted him to the colony's judgment chamber. This stark room, with cold metallic walls, echoed with the footsteps of those who dared enter. Cedric struggled against their grip, his heart pounding in his chest as he realized the gravity of his situation. He had broken the colony's laws, but he was determined to maintain his composure. As they pushed him into the chamber, he caught sight of the judge's 3 female guards, including their leader, Works. Works was tall and imposing, her presence dominating the room. The other 2 guards, Sci-Fi and Awoke, were equally striking, their bodies toned and athletic. As they looked down upon him, their expressions shifted from sternness to surprise. The handsome and muscular man before them had a magnetic quality that was impossible to ignore. Without a word, they seated Cedric in a chair and bound his arms and legs. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, and whispers of his attractiveness filled the air as the guards conferred amongst themselves. They were intrigued perhaps he could be of use to them in ways they hadn't anticipated. As Cedric was thrust into this sterile environment, he took a deep breath and steeled himself. "What is the charge?" he demanded, trying to project authority despite his bound state. Works stepped forward, her gaze penetrating. "You were trespassing, and we cannot allow that. You have violated our laws," she stated, her tone serious. Cedric leaned forward, a smirk playing on his lips. "I'm here to help you," he replied smoothly. The guards exchanged confused glances, prompting him to clarify. "You don't need to feel ashamed. Just like humans, you experience mating cycles. I was sent here by my people to assist you during this time." The guards, captivated by his confidence, considered his words seriously. Yet, formalities remained. "You need to change your clothes," they ordered, tossing a set of garments to the floor before exiting the room to give him privacy. As Cedric changed, he couldn't help but think about how his situation had turned from a scientific mission into something entirely different. He had always been aware of the biological intricacies of alien life, but never did he think he would find himself entangled in a scenario where those intricacies played such a pivotal role in his survival. While the guards waited outside, Cedric called out to Works. She re-entered, wielding a baton that danced teasingly across his face. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice low and sultry. Cedric grinned, leaning closer. "If you wish, I could ensure every one of you bears a child. This opportunity won't come around again," he declared, his tone shifting from playful to earnest. Works's interest piqued as she leaned in closer, planting a soft kiss on his cheek. Yet she restrained him again, binding his limbs more securely. The guards had a strategy, and Cedric was the pawn in their game. As they wrestled with their primal urges, the sound of their activity reverberated in the enclosed space. The other guards listened intently, their curiosity growing as they exchanged whispers about Cedric's confidence and charm. When Works finally left, Zype took her turn, striding in with determination. The moment she entered, Cedric felt a spark of attraction. She wasted no time, planting a passionate kiss on his cheek upon entering. The heat from her kiss ignited something within him, and he felt compelled to break free. "Let me out of these binds," he urged, but she only smiled mischievously, teasing him with her proximity. The tension built between them like a taut string ready to snap. Cedric's pulse quickened, and he could feel the effects of their attraction, a magnetism that pulled them closer together. Zype's playful demeanor made him sweat, and soon she was dancing, her body swaying to an unheard melody. Cedric was captivated, drawn to her every move. As minutes turned into a blissful hour, their desires intertwined, and Cedric's restraints began to loosen, an unintentional gift from Zype, whose charm held him captive. Just as Cedric felt the last of his bonds slip away, Zype stepped back, allowing her fellow guards to witness the scene. When Works and Awoke entered, Cedric raised his arms in surrender. "I mean no harm. I'm here to help." His unexpected trust earned him the admiration of the guards. As night turned to dawn, the guards, still entranced by Cedric's magnetic charm, succumbed to exhaustion and fell asleep. Seizing the opportunity, Cedric quietly slipped out of the room. He navigated the dimly lit corridors of the colony, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The colony's layout was complex, but Cedric had an advantage: his scientific mind. He memorized every turn he took, every corner he rounded, as he moved closer to the transport bay. The low hum of machinery filled the air, and he could hear the distant chatter of the guards as they began their morning rounds. Reaching the transport bay, he quickly prepared the ship for launch. The sleek vessel was designed for rapid escape, and Cedric's heart raced with the thrill of impending freedom. He glanced back at the colony, a mix of relief and exhilaration flooding him. As the engines roared to life, he felt a surge of triumph. Just as he was about to initiate takeoff, a commotion erupted behind him. The guards were waking up, and Cedric knew he had to act fast. He punched in the launch sequence, praying the ship would respond quickly enough. The countdown began, and he could hear the voices of the guards growing closer. In a flurry of motion, he strapped himself into the pilot's seat, his hands shaking with adrenaline. Just as the doors sealed shut, Cedric engaged the thrusters, and the ship shot upward, breaking free from the lunar surface. He watched as the colony grew smaller in the viewport, the faces of the guards fading into oblivion. Back at the colony, the guards awoke to chaos. Their leader's frantic orders echoed as they scoured the premises for Cedric. "Where is he?" Works shouted, her frustration palpable. The guards searched every inch of the facility, but there was no sign of the handsome intruder. Panic began to spread among the ranks. The initial shock of their encounter had morphed into something deeper, an obsession that none of them had anticipated. As they combed through the rooms, whispers circulated about the man who had captivated their hearts and ignited their primal instincts. The morning light streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Works, Zype, and Awoke huddled together, their faces drawn with concern. "He can't have gone far," Zype insisted, her eyes darting around as if expecting to see Cedric appear at any moment. "Perhaps he found a way to escape," Awoke suggested, her voice tinged with disappointment. "What if we never see him again?" Cedric, meanwhile, was light years away, hurtling through space back to Earth. As the ship traversed the stars, he reflected on the strange turn of events. He had set out on a scientific mission, but he had become embroiled in a complex web of desire and survival. The guards had been powerful and alluring, their fascination with him igniting a fire he never knew he possessed. He leaned back in the pilot's chair, the low hum of the ship's engines vibrating beneath him as memories flooded his mind, the scent of the colony's metallic corridors, the heat of Works's commanding gaze, the playful yet intense interactions with Zype, and the electric chemistry with Awoke. A quiet smile crossed his lips, but it was laced with melancholy. There was a part of him that regretted leaving so abruptly, without a true goodbye, without exploring what might have blossomed if he'd stayed. The scientist in him argued that his mission was paramount, but the man in him wondered what he might have sacrificed by running. He replayed their final moments in his head, the surprise in their eyes when they realized he was gone, the mix of desire and confusion that must have filled the space he'd left behind. The ship's AI chimed, breaking his reverie, approaching Earth's orbit. Initiating re-entry protocols. The voice was mechanical and cold, a stark contrast to the heated whispers and gentle touches he had experienced only days before. "Confirm re-entry," Cedric replied, his voice steady but his heart heavy. The console's lights flickered as the ship adjusted its trajectory, preparing to breach Earth's atmosphere. Cedric's gaze lingered on the stars outside the viewport, feeling as though they were watching him with knowing eyes. As the blue and green sphere of Earth grew larger, a message blinked on his communication panel. It was from his superior, a curt reminder that his debrief was scheduled for the following day. Cedric's jaw clenched as he read the impersonal words. After everything he had been through, the return to Earth felt sterile, lifeless. His thoughts drifted back to Works's intense gaze, the softness in Zype's eyes, the shiver that had run down his spine when Awoke touched him. Earth seemed smaller now, its wonders diminished by the experiences he had had on the colony. The descent was rougher than expected, the ship rattling as it passed through the atmosphere. Cedric gripped the sides of his seat, focusing on the feeling of gravity pulling at him once more. It was an anchoring sensation, one that tethered him back to the present. He would soon be surrounded by colleagues, questioned about his findings, lauded for the data he brought back. Yet, none of them would know what truly haunted him, what truly made this mission unforgettable. The landing was smooth, the ship touching down in an isolated area shrouded by dense forest. Cedric powered down the vessel, exhaling slowly as the engine's roar dwindled to silence. He sat there for a moment, staring at his own reflection in the glass, searching his own eyes for answers. Had he changed? Would the man who left Earth 7 days ago recognize the one returning now? The door of the ship hissed open, letting in a rush of cool, damp air. It carried with it the scent of pine and earth, grounding him once more. Cedric stepped out, feeling the crunch of leaves beneath his boots. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a golden glow over the horizon and painting the sky with hues of pink and orange. Yet, in this peaceful scene, his mind still echoed with the heat of the colony, the voices of the guards, the unfulfilled promises hanging between them. As he walked towards the secured vehicle waiting to take him to the debriefing center, Cedric glanced up at the morning sky, where the stars were beginning to fade. A part of him wanted to reach out, as if he could summon back the moments that had already slipped into memory. The ache of it startled him, the depth of feeling he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just physical, it was the connection, the rawness of facing beings who had no need for human pretenses. They had seen him, desired him, and trusted him in ways no one on Earth ever had. The debriefing room was exactly as Cedric remembered it, sterile and cold, with walls lined in metallic panels that reflected harsh fluorescent light. A trio of senior officials sat at a long, polished table, their faces impassive as Cedric entered. He handed over the files containing his findings, and they skimmed through the data with quick, practiced eyes. "Excellent work, Dr. Morgan," one of them said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You've gathered crucial information on the environmental conditions and biological ecosystems of the colony. This will serve as the foundation for our future explorations." Cedric nodded, but inside, the praise felt hollow. They would never know the risk he had taken or the lives he had touched. For them, it was all numbers and reports. The conversation moved on, touching on atmospheric pressure, soil composition, and data points that would mean advancement for human colonization. But Cedric's thoughts kept slipping, back to the warmth of skin against his, the glint of mischievous eyes under alien lights, and the inhabitants, an official suddenly asked, bringing him back to the present with a jolt. "Did you have any interactions with the colonists?" Cedric paused, his heart thumping. Briefly, he said, carefully choosing his words. "They single quotes read ... more complex than we anticipated. Adaptable, intelligent, with customs that reflect both primal and highly structured social dynamics." The officials exchanged looks, curiosity piqued, but not enough to press further. They moved on to more questions about the colony's defenses and potential weaknesses, but Cedric only half listened. Part of him was relieved they didn't pry, while another part felt an inexplicable urge to speak, to tell them about works, Sci-Fi, and Awoke, about how they had challenged not just his mission, but his understanding of connection and desire. The debrief ended, and Cedric was free to leave. He stepped out of the cold room, into the bright, sterile corridors that now felt constricting. The hum of earthly life buzzed around him, the chatter of scientists, the shuffle of footsteps on polished floors. Yet he felt like an outsider looking in, a visitor to his own world. Weeks turned into months, and Cedric resumed his duties. He published papers, attended meetings, and gave lectures. Colleagues marveled at his findings. Invitations flooded in for him to speak at symposiums and summits. Yet, each evening as he returned to his quiet apartment, the silence was filled with longing. He would stand by the window, looking out at the night sky, tracing constellations with his eyes and feeling a pull deep in his chest. Dreams came, often dreams of Works's firm hands guiding him, Sci-Fi's teasing smile, Awoke's soft laughter that carried a warmth he craved. They whispered to him in sleep, reminding him of what he had left behind, of what still called out to him. The idea of returning began as a whisper, an impossible notion that grew louder each day. Cedric researched quietly, mapping out how he might find his way back, studying the colony's flight paths and access points. The more he delved, the more he felt like a man possessed by an unquenchable thirst. One night, as he stood under the expanse of stars that felt so much further away than they had months ago, he made a decision. He would return to the colony not as a researcher with a checklist of objectives, but as a man following the echo of desire and unfinished stories. The preparations were meticulous, but fueled by an energy he hadn't felt in months. His superiors believed he was working on a new project for deep space data collection, a guise that allowed him the resources and cover needed to make the journey. When the day came, he boarded a new ship, his heart pounding with anticipation and trepidation. As the engines roared to life and the ground fell away beneath him, Cedric felt an exhilarating rush. The stars stretched out before him, welcoming him back into their embrace. The journey was silent, but electrified with his determination. Each parsec brought him closer to the unknown, to the colony where 3 fierce and unforgettable guards awaited, perhaps still watching for the return of the man who had slipped through their fingers like stardust.